This Choircast podcast is brought to you by The Collective. At The Collective, we believe that justice isn't optional, it's actually sacred. That's why we're building a growing library of progressive resources, connecting you with queer and Black-owned businesses, linking to books that challenge the status quo, and delivering content that empowers you to resist fascism with clarity and compassion. So join the movement. Support the mission. Visit The Collective, that's QUOLLECTIVE.com, The Collective, to learn more and get involved.
Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? You've made it to another book club episode of the Unbelief Podcast, and we are shifting gears. We are moving from talking about a bunch of the stories that Jesus told that are often called parables to a book of the Bible that pushes back on all kinds of social norms and advocates for inclusion and justice. The book is called the Book of Ruth. It's when you have the full collection of Christian scriptures, it is in the Old Testament. But it is, being in the Old Testament, it is also part of the Jewish sacred texts, and it is brilliant. Now, I should say, one of the things that will stand out when we're talking about Ruth is how Ruth actually pushes back against parts of the Bible, laws that are in the Bible, and it helps us see that the Bible is not univocal. The Bible actually has multiple voices, multiple books. Each book has its own perspective. It has its own time period, both the time period that it's talking about as well as the time period in which it was written, which are often very different. And they argue with each other. The Book of Ruth pushes back directly against a number of things that you find advocated for in the other parts of the Bible. And this is an important insight. Not just that the Bible has multiple voices in it, that's pretty easy to understand, but that the Bible itself is sort of a conversation. And even when you find something that says it is the words of God, right? You will find in other places the Bible arguing against the words of God. That, I don't know, for someone who grew up in the more evangelical perspective of the Bible being univocal, right? The Bible having one message, that message relates to Jesus, that all of that thing in the Bible, say that the Bible disagrees perfect with itself. We don't have to assume that the words of the Bible were somehow the words handwritten by God through in another section, some sort of human zombie. It's not like the humans who were writing the Bible were mindless and God was controlling their hands. No, the humans were involved in their cultures, in their moments, and some things that were in line with what God said in other scriptures seemed like injustice to them. And so they wrote things like the Book of Ruth to advocate against doing some of the laws that exists in the scriptures, in the Old Testament. Like, that empowers us to do the same, to look at the Bible and be able to have a conversation with it, right? When you're reading something in the Bible and it says to you, it seems to you like injustice, you don't have to agree with it. You can disagree with the Bible. I can disagree with the Bible, and that's okay. In part because the Bible disagrees with itself. The Bible argues against itself. And that gives a lot of freedom for us to read the Bible in a more healthy, more open way, right? We can approach the Bible and say, okay, let me have a conversation with this. Let me push back against it. Let me have it push back against me. And I can process that as a human who lives in my specific moment in time and place in the world. Yeah. Wow, that's huge. I mean, when I discovered this was a 180 from where I began. But let's talk about the book of Ruth. I mean, the book of Ruth, first off, let's just be clear-minded and realize the culture into which this story was written. We'll talk about the dating in just a second. And the culture that it's depicting are incredibly patriarchal, even misogynistic cultures by modern day standards. And so to have a book whose main character is a woman who's labeled for us the book of Ruth is dramatic. And it is dramatic in the sense that there is not an endorsement in the Bible of patriarchy or misogyny. Like we said, the Bible isn't of one voice. It's not of one opinion on almost anything. But when people want to argue for the biblical sort of patriarchal or misogynistic view that the man is the head of the household or any of these things that want to sort of lean into the patriarchy and misogyny of the Bible, we have to recognize that actually the Bible doesn't consistently argue for the patriarchy. Now, the things that exist in the Bible, they are stories from that time. And so you will find patriarchy, you will find misogyny in it. But what is important is that there are many, many moments when that misogyny, that patriarchy is challenged, and this is one of them. There's a couple of really helpful things to know as we are reading this book because they figure prominently sort of throughout it, and I'll drop little reminders here and there as we go along. But the first thing is to note that Ruth is a Moabite. And now when you read that, you will say, oh, that's like a nationality. And for most of us who would sort of read that and just sort of skim over it. But in this part of the world, that designation of her as a Moabite is massive because the Moabites were not well regarded by the Israelites. They descended from a similar ancestor, right? So if you remember in the book of Genesis, Abraham moves out of his homeland and eventually down into this area. He brings with him Lot. They eventually part ways, and it doesn't seem like they part ways in an angry fashion. But the descendants of Lot end up being the Moabites, and so the Moabites are not thought of as Jewish. They are often thought of as enemies in several different stories. And there's actually archaeological evidence to sort of underscore that. Something called the Mesha Stele that dates to about 840 BCE. And that stele actually it talks about Moab, and it talks about this sort of conflict between them and the Jewish people. And so that is that's not just like a narrative function. That's sort of it's based in a historical reality. But in the book of Deuteronomy, in chapter 22, there is this prohibition of Moabites entering into the assembly, the people of Israel to the 10th generation, right? That you should never marry, even if you go out to the 10th generation, right? There should be no Moabites in the family that are connected to Israel. That's the level of we don't like these people that exists in the Bible and in those people, the people who originally heard this. So when they heard Moabite, they would immediately view the Moabite people in the story. Ruth is a Moabite with suspicion, right? How dare they? How dare they be feel like they could come into Israel? How it would be very, very biased against them. You can think in the modern world there are different groups that one nationality or one ethnicity views with contempt, right? And that's what we have here. And I don't know, that seems instructive. And I think one of the things that we should continually be looking for when we are investigating, when we're exploring this amazing book, is this theme of inclusion. This theme of, you don't like this group. You have othered them. They are the other people. They are the people that you demonize and you talk down about, the butt of your jokes when you are around the people that you consider, your people. They are the people that oh no, we don't like them. And here, those people are celebrated and included. Like, a huge message of this is everyone is included. And I think as we read and explore this book, it's going to challenge us. It's going to challenge us to ask that question. Who am I excluding? Right? Who do I treat as the other? And you might not do it with a whole group of people. You might not be homophobic or racist or classist or ageist, right? You might not be a person that always talks down about Gen Z. But what about that person in the office or that neighbor, the one that can do no right in your eyes, the one that you blame or you just are constantly, what about them? Yeah, this text says, them too. You need to deal with your human tendency to find someone to be the other. Maybe it's people of a political party. Maybe it's people who voted for a specific candidate, and you just can't think anything good about them. Yeah, this book is gonna be hard, because if you read it, if you allow it to read you, it's gonna say some uncomfortable things to you. It does to me. And if you can have that sort of supernatural power to allow it to push back against you, it can help you become a much better version of yourself. When you start asking the question, who is it that I treat as the other? But let's talk about the dating of this scripture. A lot of times I don't find the date that something was written as particularly helpful when you are looking at a text, unless you are a biblical scholar, because the biblical scholars, when they see the dates, it has all sorts of beautiful color around it for them. But this one, the dating gives us some beautiful insights. So it says it's taking place during the time of the judges. That's thought of as between 1200 and 1100 BCE. The time of the judges, it's very tumultuous. This is before, right, Israel has a king. And so we're in this really unstable, fluid, difficult time during the history of Israel. Now, there are still a handful of scholars that will argue that this book was written during the time of David, like 1000 BCE, so that it was written very close to that, because it talks about the kings of Israel, and it mentions David, but it doesn't actually mention any of the kings after David, and that's an important sort of dating practice, right? When you're looking at texts, you look at those kinds of things to help date them, as well as place names and those kinds of things that, like, a place that didn't exist before a certain period couldn't be referenced, right? But that view is not part of the scholarly consensus. The scholarly consensus is that it is much later. And another thing that people use to date text is linguistics, right? So you can find texts that have been dated really well, and linguists will look at the way people phrase things. Like, for example, you can talk about things like currently a guy or a girl can have Riz and be able to get people's phone numbers that they want to date rather easily. It's a shortened form of charisma, but that's happened in the last just handful of years. And so if you find somebody that is writing and they use that term, that phrase, that sort of colloquialism, it's after this time, right? So there's linguistic pieces, and not just those terms, also the way things are structured. There's a number of different linguistic methods for dating a text. And when you take that and some of these other factors, the scholarly consensus is that it was most likely dated in like the 400s BCE. And that's important because it's during that time that Ezra and Nehemiah sort of have these reforms, and one of the reforms that they have is, and you can look at Ezra 9 and 10, Nehemiah 13, is that they commanded Jewish men to divorce their foreign wives in order to purify the community. One scholar, and so basically, in that context, a book that has a foreign woman as the heroine that is ultimately brought into a Jewish family, that is making a political statement, right? And a scholar named Todd Linnefelt I think puts it really well and succinctly. He says, some scholars think that the book of Ruth was written as a protest against Ezra's decree that men of Judah could not have foreign wives. So this is this scholar, really it's the scholarly consensus that this dating also means that this is way more than a story, that the original hearers are hearing this as a pushback, not just against misogyny in general, but against a specific political action, like a specific thing that the Ezra and Nehemiah are doing that is unjust. And so this, I think, for us, helps us read it in a different light, in a different tone, right? If you can imagine a political issue today. So, for example, one political issue that is in the center of a lot of Christian discussion is the way that immigrants are being treated in America right now. And while just a handful of Christians seem to be supporting the mass deportations and the internment camps that are being set up in places like Florida without air conditioning and all of this stuff, most Christians are really pushing back against these policies. And so that is the tension and the tone of the book of Ruth. Like when we read it, we need to read it with that like, oh, wow, that's a statement. oh, geez, like if everybody's supposed to be divorcing their foreign wives, what is happening here? And so this is a story. It's set again in the time of the judges, but it is it's talking about the political reality of that moment, which again, I mean, that hits hard, right? Because we are in moments all the time politically that feel like they go against values of Judaism and Christianity and values expressed in the Bible. And this is an example of saying, no, we're not going to be silent. We're not going to say that religion should not be in conversation with politics, that our religious views shouldn't impact our political views. No. We're not doing that. No, we are going to involve all of who we are, including our spirituality, in finding our purpose, and purposes of our lives that are greater than ourselves, right? These issues that we feel like we should engage in. We're going to do that. Yeah, we're not leaving it out. Yeah. All right, so we are going to actually talk about a couple of verses. We're just going to talk about the very beginning, the introduction to the book of Ruth. We're going to deep dive into all of this, but we're going to start in chapter 1. Again, when I read, it's going to be from the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition. That is the version of the Bible that scholars say is the most reliable English translation right now. So right there, chapter 1 and verse 1, it says, in the days when the judges ruled. Again, that helps us situate when the writers of this story want us thinking about these events taking place. There's a whole book, the book of Judges, that give you, an example of that. And one of the things about the book of Judges is that there's a downward spiral, right? It gets worse and worse. There's this cycle to the book of Judges that just, it's like the cycle of humanity, and that the idea is like without God intervening, we just get worse and worse and worse. That's the human condition, right? And so it says, it's in the days of Judges, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab. Now, Bethlehem, this is just an ironic thing, and it's the way if writers are good writers, they do these little things that bring life and sort of reinforce messages, right? Bethlehem is actually the house of bread. That's what Bethlehem means. And in the house of bread, there is no bread. Yeah. Beautiful little turn of phrase, right? So we get the name of the man is Elimelech. Elimelech is married to Naomi, and Elimelech and Naomi have two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. And they, so we've got Elimelech and Naomi are the parents of Mahlon and Chilion. And so they go, and then it says they go from Israel to Moab. And at that point, right, the people are like, who are hearing this are like, gosh, of all the places, why there? To the enemy? Like, those people are awful. And they're thinking like, man, these people are going to be completely corrupted by that land, by those people. They should never have gone and settled there. And I actually know people whose parents have felt the same way. Like, they moved to a big city or they moved to a where, and their parents were like, oh, I mean, they're going to be ruined by that. They went to a progressive school and they said, oh, geez, their minds are just going to be brainwashed. Yeah, that's what's happening here. That's what the people who are hearing this are understanding, right? That's the subtext here. So they go to Moab, and Elimelech, right, the father here, dies. Luckily for Naomi, she has 2 sons, so she's good. And it says, and here we go. Here is the beginning, right? Remember, Ezra and Nehemiah have said, if you have a foreign wife, you need to divorce her. Yeah. And so right here, it says in verse 4 that the 2 sons took Moabite wives. And so like everybody is, in this moment that is really stigmatized. And so people are like, oh, geez, yeah, they did. They were corrupted. Like, they went there, they took Moabite wives, and we all know that like that they should really divorce those wives. But yeah, they took Moabite wives. And so it gives us the name of the wives, Orpah, and then the name of the other, Ruth. And then it says, when they lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion die. So that now Naomi, the mother, is left without her 2 sons or her husband. So in this moment, Naomi is in a desperate situation. In that world, this patriarchal, misogynistic world, everything, all of the systems are built to empower and preference men. Property was owned by them. Property was passed down from man to son. So if the husband dies and there are no sons, or the sons die, the wife is destitute and in danger. People can just take what they want. She is powerless and often penniless. Yeah. Yeah, she's in a hard place. I know that place. I know that place of feeling like all of the ground has gone out from under my feet and I am sinking. If you live long enough, you experience that. There's a kind of anxiety that you have never experienced until you've experienced that. The feeling of like, wait, am I going to have a place to live? Am I going to have friends? Is there, like, what is going to happen to me? And if you have a family, to my family. We find out that Naomi is really close to her daughters-in-law. Her daughters-in-law have no sons. They are in the same place as her. So she's probably worried for herself, anxious about herself. What am I going to do? Where am I going to live? How am I going to eat? And for her daughters-in-law. And when you are in that desperate place, it can feel painful and dark and lonely. And you don't know what to do or where to go. And the beginning of this book is about that. that is where we are headed. And what we are ultimately going to find is that does not last forever. That it gets better. And that in the way that spirituality expresses those changes, that God helps. But it doesn't stop the pain of this moment. And so if you're in that place, I just want to validate that, right? That is real. And anyone who tells you that like, oh, God is good, oh, whatever, and tries to minimize that, they're wrong. No, it's bad. It's hard. And that is a valid way to feel even when you are a person who believes in spirituality or the universe or God or Jesus. And in those moments, it is important to give ourselves space to feel those things and also to begin trying to figure out what the hell you're going to do. So I want to leave us right in that place with that anxiety, sitting in that place, because that's how life is. It's not an overnight turnaround. And tell you that when you are in those places, one of the best things is to be able to be in a community with people. We have one of those. It's called Not Church. And it's a place where people who are interested in spirituality come together to talk about life, spirituality, their own religious trauma, politics sometimes, to talk about sexuality, and to be there for each other, right? We have a part of it that's all about holding space, and where people will post like, hey, I have this job interview and I don't even know. I lost my job. I'm having chest pains. I'm going to the please hold space for me. It's like, I'll be honest, I've been involved in professional religious ways for the last 26 years. It's what I always wished I could have found. Yeah. And it's $3 a month. And the reason we charge for it is because all of the people in there, I think all of them, I can't speak for all of them, but most people in there have been traumatized by being manipulated out of their money in religious spaces. And so we don't ask for donations. We charge, and it's a pay for what you get kind of thing. $3 a month gets you into Not Church. And we say like, look, if it doesn't work for you, just stop paying. It's only $3. So you can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. That's patreon.com/skepticpastor. And you can get into Not Church there. I think you will love it. And I can't wait to meet you there. I'm in there. I interact almost every day with this community, and it's great. We have little Zoom calls and in-person meetups. It's a lot of fun. So you should check it out. And if you're listening to this podcast and you like it, share it with a friend. Like, send it. It really helps when you spread the word. And of course, when you give us all the stars and even maybe write a review and say this podcast doesn't suck, that would be amazing.
That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Pathos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place. Okay? We'll see you next time.